Bitcoin is the best performing asset on the planet over the last 15 years, and in today's video we're going to explain why we think everyone should have some allocation of Bitcoin. On April the 7th, Bitcoin hit $74,000. That was a 32% drop from its high on the 20th of January at $109,000. Despite this, everyone who bought Bitcoin outside of the period between November 2024 and January 2025 is still in profit, because Bitcoin's up a massive 527% since February 2023. So in just 2 years, Bitcoin's price has 5x'd in value. And for me, there is much higher to come for Bitcoin in the next year, but also in the next 5 and 10 years. Bitcoin is the best performing asset on the planet, and today we're going to discuss some of the reasons why a Bitcoin allocation makes a lot of sense. Today's video, we're not going to discuss all the technicalities, how Bitcoin's mined, the halving, all the complexities that go along with Bitcoin. Simply, we're just going to show why it's the best asset to hold. Okay, let's start with the negatives. So you've probably heard everything bad about Bitcoin. It's a scam, it's a Ponzi scheme, it's going to zero. Even Warren Buffett, widely regarded as one of the top investors in the world, says Bitcoin is rat poison. Even doubled down last year, saying it's rat poison squared. If we flick over, Martin Lewis, who widely regarded as some economic guru, talks about Bitcoin being a scam all the time. Weirdly, he never suggests anyone invest in it. He doesn't even understand it based on his tweets. And then we've got BlackRock, the biggest hedge fund in the world, managing over $13 trillion of assets. The CEO, Larry Fink, calls Bitcoin an index of money laundering. We'll talk about Larry Fink in a second, but this just highlights there is so much negativity around Bitcoin, so many people warning against it. But despite this, Bitcoin's market cap is almost $2 trillion. It peaked to over $2 trillion just a couple of months ago. And with more adoption, more people believing in Bitcoin, and more people opting out of the traditional system, Bitcoin's market cap is expected to blow past $5 trillion in the next couple of years, with estimates of over $10 trillion by 2030. Bitcoin is currently the 7th most valuable asset on the planet, behind Google, Amazon, Nvidia, Apple, Microsoft, and gold. It recently overtook silver in terms of market cap, and if it was to blow past the $5 trillion market cap, it would be the 2nd most valuable asset on the planet. Okay, so let's turn to some of the positives. Why should people think about adding Bitcoin to their portfolio? Well, BlackRock CEO, who has made a massive 180 turnaround on Bitcoin, now declares Bitcoin as an asset comparable to gold. BlackRock, the biggest hedge fund in the world with 13 trillion AUM, launched its ETF last January, and it quickly became one of the fastest selling ETFs in history. The Bitcoin inflows into the ETF have been huge, and they've broken every single record for ETFs. Larry Fink himself has now called Bitcoin a major asset. He's also said that Bitcoin should be considered a hedge against dollar devaluation. Inflation is crippling everybody's purchasing power, and he believes Bitcoin is an escape for that. So let's shift to talking about inflation, because ultimately for me that's one of the biggest reasons why you should hold Bitcoin. Now, we've all heard the stories from parents or grandparents who talk about back in their day things were much cheaper. You could buy a house, you could buy a car, you could support a family on one wage. That just isn't the case these days, and it's because of government inflation. Money printing has caused that. If we look at this, in 1990, $100, you would need $251 to buy the same amount of goods these days. And if we fast forward, it doesn't get any better. In the year 2000, $100 would mean you would need $190 today. Now, inflation is really simple. It's basically more money in the economy. If we look at this chart, we can show that the money supply has continued to grow year after year. More money in the economy chasing the same amount of goods or resources causes prices to rise, and the value decreases because there's so much money being pumped into the economy. As you can see, this is a constant trend And we can see in 2020, due to C19, we had a massive spike in the money supply. Inflation was made worse because we also had a reduction in goods and services being provided. So the two combined caused huge spikes in inflation. But ultimately, this trend, going back to the 70s of money printing, inflating the currency, has caused people's purchasing power to drop year after year. The reported figure is an average of 2% inflation per year. However, the money supply has been grown on average since the 80s at around 8%. That means if every single year you're not getting an 8% pay rise or bringing 8% more money into your house, you are falling behind and you're actually getting poorer every single year. Now, over the last few years, inflation became a buzzword. It was everywhere. Every time you turned on the news, they were talking about inflation. But what actually is inflation, and how does Bitcoin help you protect yourself against the effects of it? Well, if we look at the graph on the screen, it basically shows the purchasing power of $100 over time. Back in 1913, $100, $100. These days, the dollar has lost almost 97% of its purchasing power. So $100 from 1913 is worth just $3.80 in today's money. This massive destruction of purchasing power is caused by governments. Governments printing or inflating the money supply lead to the demise of the purchasing power of the pounds or dollars you have in your pocket. So every year, those pounds or dollars become worth less than the year before because governments constantly increase the money supply. And they do this to fund programs like Social Security, pensions, benefits, healthcare, because the tax receipts don't cover the amount of expenses the government has. So to fill the gap, they print the difference. And that leads to inflation, but it mostly hurts anyone with cash savings. And it means the purchasing power of your money decreases year after year. Okay, so how does all this impact Bitcoin? Well, as we can see on the chart, if we go back in time, Bitcoin was created in 2009 in the aftermath of the great financial crisis. As we can see, over time, Bitcoin appreciates in value, and this is a trend that's continued throughout the years. Now, many will point to these big drawdowns. Bitcoin does have big drawdowns. It's volatile. Sometimes it will crash 60, 70, 80% in a year. But the uptrend is so significant that it outweighs that time and time again. And on a 4-year time horizon, no one is underwater on their investment. Meaning, if you buy Bitcoin at any point in time, in 4 years, you know you're pretty much guaranteed to be in profit. Bitcoin appreciates in value because every 4 years, the supply coming onto the network every day is cut in half. That means every day you know the supply of Bitcoin. If demand just stays the same, then there is expected to be a price rise. But due to the fact that governments around the world continue to manipulate the money supply, Bitcoin adoption is growing year after year. And with global institutions like BlackRock, the ETFs all coming on board, even the US government talking about a strategic Bitcoin reserve, we know demand is going to go absolutely skyward in the next few years. Combine that with a supply shock caused by less supply coming onto the network every 4 years, price is only going to go one way, in my opinion. But the significant thing is Bitcoin is a hard asset. It's fixed supply. There's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin. No more can be created. And you know how many are coming out of the network every single day. So when you put that up against an inflating currency like the dollar or the pound, every year Bitcoin should appreciate in value. And we have some really cool graphics to show this. So if we look at this screen, we can see that house prices in the UK have trended upwards for the past 50 years. If we look at February 2017, the average house in the UK was £198,000. 258 Bitcoin was required to buy that house. Fast forward to 2025, the average UK house is £268,000. However, now you only need 3.18 Bitcoin. The appreciation of Bitcoin the devalue of the pound means that when you save in Bitcoin, things get cheaper over time because the value in pounds or dollars goes up over time. If we show this for our US cousins, we can see that the value of a US house in 2016 was just $250,000. Fast forward to today, it's over $400,000. And we can see back in 2016, you needed 600 Bitcoin to afford the average home. Now, just 4.8 Bitcoin. So, in 2016, if you had put that $250,000 into Bitcoin instead of buying a house, in today's money, you would be able to buy 12 houses with the same amount of Bitcoin. On top of that, that $250,000, instead of buying a house, buying Bitcoin with it back in 2016, you would now have over $60 million at current prices. And this is all because of inflation. Western governments continue to print money. They devalue their currency. So when it's measured up against a hard asset like Bitcoin or gold, over time, the Bitcoin or gold rises in value while the currency is devalued. This is why holding Bitcoin is such an important part of an investment portfolio. Now, this is why it becomes so important. Many people out there will be saving for their retirement, but if inflation continues to trend the way it has over the last 25 years, then you're going to need a lot more money in the future to afford the same amount of things you can afford today. So when people are planning for their future, they often talk about today's prices, but we know they are not going to be valid in the future, especially in 10 to 25 years ahead. So if we look at the last 25 years, in the year 2000, if you had £100,000 in your bank, today you would need £187,000 to afford the same amount of goods, services, property, whatever you need. You would need almost double that amount because of inflation. So we can assume that's going to be the same in the next few years. Now, all estimates suggest Bitcoin is going to over $1 million in the next 5 to 10 years. In 25 years, it could be over $10 million. So if you took 100k today and put it into Bitcoin, you would have just one Bitcoin. However, that one Bitcoin in 25 years is probably going to be worth $10 million because Bitcoin outpaces inflation and it's a hedge against inflation. And with the biggest CEO in the world, Larry Fink, calling it a hedge against the US dollar, you would be silly to ignore those warnings. If this chart continues its trend, continues to trend upwards, Bitcoin is going much, much higher. And while we know it's a guarantee the money in your pocket or in your bank is going down in value year after year, the best form of protection is to buy an asset that goes up in value versus the devaluation of currency. Bitcoin is, for me, the number one asset on the planet for this. It appreciates faster than inflation, and when the money printing really starts, Bitcoin explodes higher. For me, the key thing is Bitcoin is a long-term strategy. Buy dollar cost average, so buy a little bit every so often, and just hold it for the long term. Do not get shaken out by these big moves where we drop 50, 60, 70% in a few months. Over the long run, this trend should continue, and we likely see a Bitcoin costing $1 million in the not too distant future. There's a famous saying in investing, the trend is your friend, and don't bet against the trend. Well, the trend for Bitcoin is clear. It's up higher and higher over time. One thing's for certain, governments around the world will continue to print money to fund their massive expenses. And as they do this, Bitcoin's value is going to increase. Unless you're getting an 8% pay rise every single year, you're going backwards. Your purchasing power is going down over time. Bitcoin is the lifeboat. It is the safety raft. It is the way to escape money printing. Over time, things get cheaper when priced in Bitcoin. And that is why I believe Bitcoin is a superior asset and everyone should have some exposure to Bitcoin. It's not going to make you rich overnight. Buying $100 today isn't going to make you a millionaire tomorrow. However, dollar cost averaging, buying a little bit every so often over time will protect your purchasing power. That's all for today. Thank you very much for tuning in. We have loads more content on our channel, or follow the link in description and join CC Pro.